Good evening, and welcome to our second evening of conversations with the deans. We're going to just wait for a couple of minutes as other people join the rooms, and then we'll begin with some introductions, and we're really looking forward to the evening. I'm just going to pause here for a minute or two, and then I will start for a moment or two and then begin. Okay, so I'm seeing people coming into the space, and I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Please let me welcome you to this evening's event of conversations with the deans. And I am Jim Corbett. I'm a faculty member in the College of Earth, Ocean, and Environment, and in the unit of Marine Science and Policy. And I'm really excited to be able to introduce the evening conversation. I want to begin by welcoming everybody in the audience. There are almost 50 people registered for this evening's event. And while you can't see each other, it's an amazing group of folks who've come to tonight. There's about 40% of the registrants tonight of you are from our alum, and almost an equal number are from faculty and staff here at the University of Delaware. And then there's some parents and there are some students who also have registered, so please, welcome. The other thing to note is that this is part of our 50th anniversary celebration year. And this is one of the events that's being hosted by our committee, who's planning a number of virtual and eventually live events into the next this whole year of celebration. The people on the committee with me, so that I just say their names briefly, are faculty, including Jen Biddle, Sue McGeary, Tracy DeLiberty, and an alum, Evelyn Marmeyer. And thank you to the committee for helping to plan these events. And this is the second of our virtual events. As a part of the 50th anniversary, I want to note that the alum that are joined and registered today, they span every one of the decades of the last 50 years, with the majority of them coming from the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. So this is really an alum event that spans and is inclusive of us all, and that's exciting. And then what it looked like in terms of your registration is that most of us are from the East Coast here nearby, but we have registered attendees from the West Coast, from the Gulf Coast, and even one from Europe on the Mediterranean. Again, that's pretty exciting. Tonight, I want to welcome Dean Estella Atekwana. She's the Dean of the College of Earth, Ocean, and Environment, and she's been here since 2017 or so, and is currently leading us through a number of really exciting changes, and during some times of uncertain changes with our pandemic. But we're very, very happy that she will be hosting tonight's conversation. And then lastly, I want to introduce Carolyn Thoroughgood. Dr. Thoroughgood has served as dean. She served as dean here for 20 years, and she's been on the faculty here for all of the decades, including the planning decades leading up to the establishment of our college. And she's been involved in every aspect of our college activities. Most recently, in the last few years, she teaches way more than I do, with many, many, many undergraduate students. And before I hand this over to you, Dean, I just want to say one thing that I talked with Carolyn earlier this week, and I thought this was really exciting. When Carolyn started commuting back and forth between our Lewis campus and our Newark campus, she knew that there were 19 red lights. And she knew that when she finished commuting that distance, there were 26 red lights. And I would challenge anybody other than some of the former faculty like Rich Garvine to know those lights as well as Carolyn. And so this is a person who has great attention to detail and great passion for what it takes to keep everything connected. So welcome, Carolyn.
Thank you.
It's yours.
So welcome to all our attendees, especially to our alums. We're delighted to have you here with us tonight. And welcome also to our second attendees. If you attended last time or last week and you're here today, we welcome you back. I've had a chance to be able to sit down with Dr. Thoroughgood and reminiscing about the old days, and it's going to be a really exciting evening, and I'm really looking forward to it. I just want to say thank you to the committee for a job well done so far. And remember, we're going to be having a series of events, and this is just one of them. So last week, we learned from Bob Biggs about how this great vision, this great experiment was born. We know that sometimes when you design an experiment to test a particular hypothesis, many times things go wrong, and sometimes you don't end up where you expected to end up. But we'll see over the next 2 weeks whether or not this great experiment worked and what kind of results came out of that experiment. So I'm delighted to welcome Carolyn here today, as she was a second dean, and I have some questions for you. So you took over the college from Bill Gaithers in 1984, and I'm presuming that at that time, there were not too many female leaders. You were also really young at the time. What motivated you, to take up this very, very important leadership position? And what do you think in your background really prepared you for taking this leadership position?
Well, when I came to the University of Delaware in 1968, and that was before the college was formed, we had a new president, President Trabant, and he decided that we needed to have a long-range planning activity, and he challenged all the university to develop 2, 5, and 10-year plans. And then he also suggested that if there were new initiatives, that they should be put forward as well. And he created a community design commission to review these plans, and we had hearings every week, an extensive review of those plans. I, for some reason, was selected to be on that commission. As an assistant professor, I got to meet and be participating in a number of different discussions, and one of the presentations that was made had to do with this creation of a new college. President Trabant recognized that the University of Delaware was primarily located in the state of Delaware that was mostly coastal, and he also saw pockets of marine interests around the institution with no coordinated oversight. And so he thought that this idea of a College of Marine Studies was really key. And he also was influenced by the Stratton Commission report. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with that, but it was called Our Nation and the Sea. It was a very influential report that was written and presented to President Nixon, actually. Julius Stratton was actually the former president of MIT. Some very important people were involved in this discussion. And there were 122 recommendations, but there was a main thing that came out of that report was the recognition that our growing population in this country was putting more and more pressure on marine and coastal resources. It was through all of that discussion and the dream of creating this College of Marine Studies that I first developed this passion for this idea. I was off teaching in another academic unit on campus, but I saw this College of Marine Studies as something really novel, and it piqued my interest. So from the get-go, I was really curious about whether or not the University of Delaware could pull this off. So I was given an opportunity in 1974 to join the college because in addition to the academic program, the College of Marine Studies also managed the Sea Grant College program. And to become a Sea Grant College program, you had to have a legitimate marine advisory service. I had done some evaluation of a couple of the cooperative extension outreach programs. Gaither came to me and he said, would you like to join our faculty and at the same time serve as Director of Marine Advisory Service? So my administrative career began then. I started at the College of Marine Studies and I was sort of split between administration and then typical faculty duties. And I also became involved in a short while in really overseeing a lot of the Sea Grant research. When Bob Biggs left in 1980, the question was, who was going to become the associate dean? And a group of the senior faculty got together and approached Gaither and said they wanted to have me be appointed as the associate dean. I was not aware of their actions, but they had become used to working with me as a result of my Sea Grant oversight. And so I became an associate dean, and I was double-hatted then as an executive director of Sea Grant. Now, Sea Grant was a university-wide program, so I got to know a lot of faculty in the other academic units who were marine-oriented. So the bottom line is that I had this experience of working within the college, and I had this respect for the faculty, and I knew where we wanted to go. And so when Gaither decided to leave and become president of Drexel, then I definitely wanted to apply for the job of becoming the dean. But there was a national search, and that national search took 10 months to do. And I was very grateful. In fact, I was really insistent that there was a national search because I wanted to be sure that the faculty would be comfortable with me if I were selected, and if I weren't, that's okay too. I must admit it was a bit awkward as the acting dean to interview, people that might take the job that I wanted, but it was okay. That was the way it worked. So I became the dean in 1980. Well, I was acting in 84, and shortly thereafter became the dean after that 10-month search. And I felt like, very comfortable in the position because the faculty had chosen me as the finalist. So that's a bit about what pulled me into becoming the dean of the college. And I was, I think, 40 years old at the time.
Wow, that's an amazing history. And I think it really, to me, I've often felt that serving in leadership positions, whether it be committee members, being a committee member, or leading a committee at the department level, college level, is really important because you never know where that leadership skills or that opportunity, can take you. And clearly, you've been able to articulate that through your history. So when you took over the college, what were the strengths or the focus of the college when you became dean, and what new direction did you take the college to during that time?
Well, when I became dean, one of the things that I knew was that we had excellent facilities. Gaither was a civil engineer, and he built a facility in Lewis, the Marine Studies Complex, and we had great laboratories. We had the Cannon Lab and the Smith Lab. We had ship operations facility. We had the Verdon Center, so the campus at Lewis, and we made it a campus, not a field station. It was an integral part of the university. And we had facilities on the Newark campus. So we were strong on facilities. We also had an established Sea Grant program. We'd become a Sea Grant college. We had a Sea Grant Advisory Council that reached out into the community. So we were building bridges within Delaware that would be supportive of marine studies. So that was a strength. We also had a lot of industrial connections because Bill came out of industry himself. This was sort of a way of doing business that he'd established, and so I inherited those industry connections. And then we had congressional support. We wouldn't have gone as far as we did had we not had that congressional support. We had senior Senator Bill Roth, who was very helpful, and then we had a junior Senator, Joseph Biden, who was also some help to us along the way. So what I found were, these tentacles out into the community and throughout the university that were quite supportive. What we didn't have at the time was a fully fleshed out core faculty. We had strong connections with joint appointment faculty, but when the college was first created, one of the stipulations was that we couldn't hire anyone with expertise that existed already at the university. We could only hire marine-oriented faculty that otherwise were not already resident at UD. So we were limited, and we were also limited in the dollars to hire such faculty. So when I became dean, I met with the provost, and we had a conversation about how best for us to move forward, because I saw it as the highest priority in recruiting faculty, developing our academic program. We had really excellent students, but we had a skeleton academic program, in all honesty, and so we needed to flesh that out. And so I took that on as what I needed to do. And I worked a deal with the provost, and basically the university looked at our college and they gave us a flat sum of money every year. And after that, we had been sold as an entrepreneurial operation as a graduate-only college. So we were to go out and raise our own dollars, you might say. So I told the provost, okay, if you're going to give me this sum of money, then let me spend it how I see I need it. Don't assign me lines and say I can't, move money around. And he agreed. And so I was able to take lines that had been secretarial lines and make them faculty lines. And, we really grew our faculty that way, and we grew in strength as well. We hired excellent faculty, and that was the intent all along. And we distributed them between the Newark and Lewis campuses, and they were really located in their best location that would support their research.
That's
so,
amazing.
Yeah.
So, so the faculty at that time were working on a lot of things, different things, and they were known across, not only at UD, but nationally as well. So what were some of the important contributions the faculty made to science and policy at that time? And what do you think was the most momentous that you remember?
Well, as I was thinking and preparing for this evening, I started thinking about all the different areas that we were working in. And I was thinking, if you were to ask me the significant scientific discoveries, it would be hard over 20 years to identify them all. But if you'll bear with me, I actually went through and I kind of made a list of all the different areas we worked in. And because it's really impressive when we think of the diversity, the College of Marine Studies had two hallmarks. We were graduate only, and we were interdisciplinary, which is sort of a strange way, or an oxymoron. You usually think of, graduate education diving deeply down into a subject matter, but we were interdisciplinary. And so we would hire faculty who enjoyed or who wanted to work at the edges of their disciplines, not necessarily the specialists that required to be part of a group, but people who were really interested in working with others that did similar things, but yet different enough that, there was a new way of doing business, you might say. And we not only covered all the natural science principles, but we also had engineering, because we wanted to put the ocean to work. And of course, then we had to add people, because of course that element was quite essential. And that's how we got into marine policy. But if I look at some of the areas that we worked in, it included the national and international ocean law and policy, marine transportation, fisheries economics, natural resource economics, biological oceanography, especially the recruitment and dispersal of marine organisms, marine molecular biology, biochemistry, and biophysics, environmental microbiology, plant physiology and salt tolerance of plants, coastal physical oceanography, world ocean circulation, biogeochemical estuarine and coastal ocean processes, electrochemistry, redox reactions in the marine environment, marine corrosion, coastal dynamics and sediment transport, acoustical oceanography, satellite oceanography, El Nino studies, and air-sea interaction. I mean, these are just things that, as I thought back over time, I was, thinking about all the different things that we did. But what was really most impressive, I think, with all that diversity, we have 6 chaired professors. When I finished and walked out the door, we had 3 of our faculty to receive the UD's Allison Award, which of course is the top honor that the university awards a faculty member at the university. We had senior faculty who were elected fellows by major professional societies. We had our assistant professors who competed and secured the Young Investigator Awards provided by NSF and ONR. We had one of our faculty receive a Presidential Faculty Fellowship, and this was a 5-year award for $500,000. It was quite impressive. We had one of our faculty be elected to the National Academy of Engineering, and another of our faculty to be elected to the National Academy of Science. And this, to date, this is the only faculty member at the University of Delaware that was ever elected to the National Academy. So this, I think, is a testament to the quality of the work that can be done, and that was done by these faculty who were by and large interdisciplinary and comfortable working, as I say, at the edges of their disciplines. And then we had students too that were competing, with best paper prizes. And we had a communications group that was helping us extend our research to the layperson, and they were winning awards. So, that was kind of what we really worked hard on doing in the selection process of all new hires, was to make sure we got the very best people who bought into this idea that we had for a College of Marine Studies.
What an amazing foundation. And I think that even today, the different areas that you mentioned, as well, that faculty we're working on, our faculty continue to work, in those areas today. And so it's I think you guys really did an amazing job for a very young college at that time. As I've said, it was a great experiment in academia in America, and it looks like the experiment was going really well. So one of the things that you talked about was how you used the strength that the college also had in those days was the facilities. And so you perceived at that time to be able to add a ship to our portfolio. So it was during this time that the college, added a research vessel, the QR Sharp, which is one of the few regional class ships owned by a university and used as part of the UNORS system. What was the goal of bringing such an advanced research vessel to campus, and how did you manage that? Ships are quite expensive.
Yes, they are.
So how did you pull that off? Really, how did you pull that off?
Well, first of all, the Sharp is not our first coastal research vessel. In 1976, we had the RVK Penlopen, and
yes.
and it was part of the UNOS fleet, and the university built it. And we could spend another evening just talking about ships, because we learned a lot. To be an oceanographic institution, the president and the board of trustees thought we needed a coastal research vessel because our commitment was to study the coastal ocean. That made us also unique in a way. And yet the National Science Foundation really didn't think that they needed another vessel. So we had a mixed bag of success during the early years. But then, over time, the RVK Penlopen became quite an effective ship, due in large part, again, to people, to our crew. The ship had its own set of design issues, but independent of all of that, scientists from all over who wanted to work in the Mid-Atlantic Bight would make positive comments about the use of the RVK Penlopen. So when it was aging, it was an aluminum hulled ship, and as it aged, the folks who in ship operations at NSF actually came to me and they said, we think that rather than trying to upgrade this ship, we ought to be thinking about building a new ship, and we want you to take the lead in thinking about the next generation coastal research vessel, the University of Delaware. We came a long, long way with NSF for them to come to us and make that suggestion. And of course, the idea was that we indeed would build that ship and pay for it, but they were continuing to support its operation. So with that, we went into a very long planning exercise. We created an advisory committee. We brought in a number of the users of the Cape Penlopen. We consulted with a lot of different naval architects and engineers, trying to think of what really was the next generation coastal research vessel. At that time, one of the research issues that was really coming to the forefront was the sound in the water column and its impact on marine organisms. And so one of the specifications for a new coastal research vessel was that it should be acoustically quiet. Another concern was, all the pollutants that were coming out of the stacks of the vessel, of any research vessel. And if you're wanting to do chemical oceanography, you don't want to be polluting what's around you with, stuff coming out of the stacks. So we, knew we had to have scrubbers on the stacks. Well, no one had ever built a coastal research vessel that was acoustically quiet. So the first naval architects did a design, and they said, well, we think it's going to cost about $10 million. So I went to President Roselle and I said, so here's the deal, and this is what's going to happen, and NSF wants us to do this, and we're going to have to fundraise, but I had some ideas about where we could get some of that money. We also had marine associates who were very interested in ships. These were friends of the college who worked with me all throughout in helping me attract excellent faculty and helped me fund this ship. And so we went ahead and had the design done. And then as we worked on the design more, long story short, the ship cost us $19 million. So, we do have an acoustically quiet vessel. It is unique. And after we had our plans and we built our ship, actually, Connie Lautenbacher, who was the administrator of NOAA at the time, came to me and he said, can we take your plans? We want to expand them to be fisheries survey vessels for NOAA, because of course commercial fishermen often complained about the fact that the survey ships were underestimating the size of fish stocks, and that was because of the noise in the water, and the fish would scatter when the big ships came on station. So NOAA built two 300 footers. taking our designs and upgrading them. So we had, you know, it was a replacement ship. It was a next generation coastal research vessel. It's a very effective vessel in the way it works, I think. And raising that $19 million was tricky. President Roselle, decided that he wasn't going to treat it as the equivalent of a building, even though it was 19 million. He was going to treat it as a piece of equipment. So, because he had other buildings that he was trying to raise money for, so this was a piece of equipment. We had help from the office. We had help from the Navy. The Navy helped us with equipment. Senator Biden at the time was good friends with Senator Inouye, who was chairman of the Appropriations Committee. And so we got some funding from the feds. We had some private support. It was a mixed bag of pulling in sources of funding from all over the place. And I got to christen the ship. Hard to believe, but I did. And as I say, and the other thing, you know, we had the ship, it was built actually in Anacortes, Washington by Dakota Creek. And so, you know, we actually sailed the ship out into international waters before we took possession of it. And that way we escaped the state tax of the state of Washington. And the money that we saved in escaping that tax was used to pay for our voyage on the heavy lift ship. So we brought the ship through the Panama Canal on a heavy lift ship, and then she was dropped in Florida, and then our crew went down and sailed her up to Lewis. So it was an adventure, and as I say, not one that I had ever thought I would be involved with, but you know, it worked.
That was great. That's really fantastic. The ship, as you know, continues to do well. And so how did you christen it the Hugh R. Sharp? Can you tell us why that name?
Yes, well, Hugh Sharp was a very special person. Hugh was a member of the Board of Trustees, and I remember meeting him even before the college was formed. He came to my lab as a young faculty member and was asking all kinds of questions. And then when I joined the College of Marine Studies, I found that he was very interested in anything having to do with the ocean. And over time, we worked with him in building a group called the Marine Associates. This was a group of loyal friends who gave of their time, their connections, and energy, as well as their checkbooks to help us in the college to succeed. And Hugh was our chief cheerleader and an enthusiast, along with, you know, I could turn to him anytime for advice and counsel. I sometimes would liken him to our academic grandfather. And I can tell you, I think without his involvement, we wouldn't be where we are today. He was very instrumental in moving us forward. And so he actually set up a fund for the college. And so as a result of all the many contributions he made over the years, we decided to name the ship after him. And as I say, he was, in fact, when the Cape Henlopen one was built, he was very active in that construction. And that ship was built in Louisiana. And Hugh had his own airline. He called it Pandemonium Airline. I think he had 2 or 3 private jets. And so he would transport UD officials down to the shipyard in Louisiana on Pandemonium Airlines just to see that ship being built. So he was a real ship enthusiast. Mm-hmm. So in addition to, as I say, being a strong supporter of the college. And so that's why we named the ship after him.
That's really fantastic, you know, and I think the ship, you know, continues to do what it was intended to do, and really it helps to elevate our reputation nationally, because most scientists today, whether it's from USGS, NSF, NOAA, or ONR type scientists, continue to use our ship. So we really thank you for that vision, for thinking about, you know, having a ship as part of our facilities. So you talked about being able to meet with people, the Marine Associates, to be able to raise funding. As you know, fundraising is a very, very important component of a dean's job. And you were instrumental in raising funds to establish several endowments. In fact, you mentioned previously there were close to about 6 or so, you know, endowment positions that you raised money for. How did you accomplish this, and what was your motivation for doing this?
Well, as I said, we were a very entrepreneurial college, and we were looking for resources from all directions to do what we wanted to do. In a sense, we had our own future in our own hands, and I rather liked that, and so did the faculty who had bought into this concept. The faculty were out there doing their job, writing proposals and competing very well to bring in research dollars. And so I couldn't look at them and not do my job, and that was to carry the tin cup and try to raise money from private sources anywhere that I could find. And over time, I hate to say it, but I almost became shameless in looking for resources from the private sector, from individuals. Patronage, of course, is not a bad way to go if you have people who are really interested in what you're doing and will give you those kinds of funding and support. I would actually, meet with attorneys who were state attorneys to tell them our story, so that in the event that someone walked in and didn't quite know what to do with their estate, they might have something that they could suggest. I mentioned our communications group. We were very effective in public relating our story, and public relating the significance of the research that we were doing. And it wasn't just, the occasional publication. We were doing 30-second public service announcements called C-Talk. We did a coffee table book on rediscovering the Delaware Estuary, rediscovering a forgotten resource. And it was converted into a half-an-hour TV show on WHYY, the public broadcasting system. It was the highest watched show that evening. So what I'm saying is we were out and about trying to get people interested and excited about what we were doing. I would meet with faculty to try to understand what their research was, what they were doing in the laboratory, or what particular project they might be working on, because when I would meet with people, they would have different interests, and I needed to have in my toolkit an understanding of all the different aspects of what we were doing so that I could essentially market an idea that they might want to support. So I did take that on as a major responsibility, and I was lucky enough or successful enough in obtaining those endowments for the chaired professorships. One of the things we also needed was graduate student support. And I can tell you, raising money for graduate student support is harder than raising undergraduate monies for undergraduate scholarships. But I encountered somebody who was very interested in our graduate work, and that was Mrs. Oki. And she provided funding for the Oki Fellowships for our graduate students. Mm-hmm. There's also a charitable remainder trust that will come due someday that will help support the college. Hugh Sharp was very instrumental in the DuPont chaired professorship. He was a member of the board of directors of the DuPont company. When the hydrothermal vents were discovered and the whole world of chemosynthesis was discovered, those organisms, Hugh became really interested, and he thought DuPont as a chemical company should have an interest in that kind of thing. So one day I went to his office on the 9th floor of the DuPont company, and he says, "Come with me. We're going to go see Hugh Dick Heckert, who was the CEO of the DuPont company." Now, this is an entree, not a lot of people have. So we go trekking off, and we walk in, and of course he's, the CEO is not going to turn down a member of the board, especially a member of the DuPont family. And so Hugh started out, and he was telling him this story about, these discoveries and the fact that we had faculty working in the hydrothermal vent zones, and that we were wanting to move in that direction. And he said, "And I think the DuPont company needs a window on this research, and I think we should set up an endowment fund for that." And the CEO says, "I think we could do that." And I'm just standing there thinking, have I died and gone to heaven? I mean, is this for real? And so this is what I'm telling you. You keep putting your wares out there, and sometimes you just get lucky. But that luck is really not totally luck, because I had to have the substance to go with it. And the faculty provided me that. I cannot tell you how critical that was. And to be able to showcase the quality of what we're doing and the breadth of what we were doing was really, really important.
That's a really amazing story. And yes, fundraising requires that you tell your story.
Yes.
And this college really has some amazing stories to tell.
Well, and you
And
have to go
yeah,
ahead, sorry.
and we had the advantage, you had the advantage that because of its size, you could meet with, you could visit almost every faculty's lab.
Right.
What they were doing. Could you imagine being in a College of Arts and Sciences where you had
No,
90 faculty?
no,
That would almost be impossible. And
no.
so while the small size of our college could be seen as a disadvantage in a much bigger pond, I really think that there are some real advantages. And because as a dean, you're much closer to your faculty, you get to know what they are doing, so that when you go on to for fundraising, you can clearly articulate the passion and the excitement, of the research that the faculty were doing. So I mean, I really want to congratulate you for laying this foundation, because these endowed position, distinguished professor positions that you have are still what we have in the college, and the scholarships, and fellowships for the graduate students is still what we have in the fellowship. And so it's, I think that's why we need lessons like this, so that we can see, where we've been and what we can do better, for the future. So the other question that I wanted to talk to you about, ask you, is that your academic background was in, according to your website and some of the things that you worked on in the past, was in biochemistry. And you are now part of the marine policy faculty. How did that happen? And
Well,
tell us a little bit about that, as well as you know, our policy, one of the uniqueness of the college was the establishment, was the integration of policy as part of the sciences. And in doing so, you did establish the Mangon Center. So tell us a little bit about how you went from being a biochemist to a policy, as well as a little bit about the Mangon Center, what role it really played in the university and what we could do better for the future.
well, again, going down memory lane, I started when I moved to the college. I was engaged in some nutritional biochemical studies, and we were heavily engaged in mariculture research, trying to culture oysters and clams in a controlled environment system. And we were trying to domesticate these animals. So essentially, these oysters and clams hadn't even reached the barnyard, if I were to use the poultry analogy. And so trying to figure out what they ate and what would allow them to grow to commercial size, because this was to be a commercial operation eventually, required a better understanding of their nutritional needs. And so I started doing some research early on with the mariculture group. So that's how my biochemistry brought me to marine studies. But then when I got siphoned off into administration, I found I had to spend more and more time on the national scene. And I spent a lot of time in DC. The ocean community is an interesting group of individuals. We're all very entrepreneurial, and we don't always work really well together. And that's been a bit of a problem, a bit of a challenge, because, when you're trying to get Congress to appropriate funds for you and you go in with mixed stories, usually the answer is, well, go back and figure out what you really want and then come talk to us, okay? So we decided as a group finally that we were going to have to stop trying to outcompete one another and actually work together. When the physicists could sell a collider and we couldn't sell anything, it was a tale that we needed to pay attention to. So we formed an organization called the Council on Ocean Affairs. And Bob Gagosian, who was then the president of Woods Hole Oceanographic, and I co-chaired that group. And so I began to spend an awful lot of time back and forth in DC. At the same time, I also chaired the Sea Grant Directors Council for the nation. And during the Reagan years, Reagan zeroed out Sea Grant, and which was actually a favor. If he'd funded us 50%, we probably would have limped along. But when he zeroed out the program, it was a call to arms. And again, as chair of that organization, we had to do something about it. And so I was toe-to-toe with the head of OMB, David Stockman, and trying to explain that, Sea Grant was not a grant and aid, that we actually returned more on the Fed's investment than most programs. In fact, we were showing about a 20-to-1 return on investment. We did a number of studies to prove that. So what I'm saying is I had a lot of that practical exposure to the policy world. Sometimes I would get in my car and be driving back to Delaware and thinking I was leaving the irrational world and coming back to the world of logic. because there's a lot of horse trading, a lot of activity that goes on both on the executive side of the House as well as the legislative side. So I got to be part of that dialogue. I saw how policy was working. When we had the Ocean Commission, I was on this the Science Advisory Board for the Ocean Commission. I became a member of the Science Advisory Board for NOAA. So what I was seeing is at all different levels how national ocean policy was working or not working. And not only that, I believe so strongly that there has to be this connectivity between our science and then how it is actually applied to promote the wise use and management of marine and coastal resources. That was that I don't know, idea that really hit me from the Stratton Commission report. And so, you know, being in DC allowed me an opportunity to understand what was going on, and I had been, quite honestly, out of the lab for so long. You know, I wasn't going to be a bench scientist again when I you know, at a point. And so that's how I sort of morphed into the policy arena. It's and then this commitment to educating society as a whole. I mean, we talk about informed decision making, and somehow people have to be informed, and that's again part of our job as faculty.
It's pretty amazing. So we all have only a few more minutes left before we open it up to, you know, the audience. So what do you think was something that you really wanted to do during your time, but that you couldn't accomplish? And as you look back at the college today, do you think that that has been accomplished? Or is there work that needs to be done?
Yeah. Well, when I left in 2004 and went to the research office, I really felt pretty confident that I had accomplished the mission that I had set out to accomplish, except for one thing. We had not addressed the issue of diversity and bringing underrepresented individuals into the world of ocean sciences. We worked really hard on that issue. I know at one time we were recruiting a faculty member, and then we absolutely said, this time is going to be it. We're going to have a faculty member from, you know, an underrepresented group. And you could count on one hand the number of PhDs that would fall into that category, but we hired one. And he stayed with us for 6 years and then decided he wanted a different career path and left. We tried a variety of approaches. At one point, we set up a summer experience for 9-month faculty from underrepresented university communities, groups, that these people could come and spend the summer with us, and it was paid. It was a paid, so I was hoping to set up some kind of a pipeline that we could have them send their students to us. And believe me, that issue is yet to be attended to. We don't see the diversity within the ocean sciences that we do in other fields. And so, you know, we have a lot more work to do in that domain. And so one of the reasons why I'm teaching undergraduates today is because I want to get to the students early. I want to spark their interest in the ocean sciences so that perhaps some student along the way will say, you know what, I really think that that's going to be for me, even though I might not have thought of it originally. So, you know, this is a job yet to be finished or yet to be really done well at all. And then that's a big disappointment actually for me.
Look, I couldn't agree with you more. And as you rightfully said, the Earth, Ocean, and Space Sciences continues to be the least diverse of all STEM fields. Yeah. And there was a recent study in Nature Geoscience that suggested even after 40 years, with lots of money from the federal government, we did not even move the needle. And so for me, as somebody who comes from the underrepresented group, I take this very, very seriously. As you know, with the recent events in our country, there's really been a call for a renewed effort. We know that diversifying our faculty, our staff and students is going to take a very deliberate and intentional effort to be able to be successful. And we, as a college, we've taken a stand, and we just announced, I think a couple of weeks ago, our new initiative, the concrete steps that we're going to be taking to create an inclusive environment, a welcoming environment, so that when we do recruit, these diverse faculty, students, and staff, they would stay because they will find an environment that supports them, that nurtures them, and that welcomes them. So it's a struggle that we all continue to work on, but hopefully we can turn that needle. So my last question for you before I open up to the audience is, you served the University of Delaware in various capacities. And I really want to thank you for your service over the last 50 years. You served as Director of the Marine Advisory Service, you served as a Dean, you served as a VP for Research. So what parting advice do you have for me as a Dean on how to build on your legacy and to continue to move this college forward?
Well, I guess the main thing that, people are what make any organization survive and thrive. And building relationships, I think, is the most important thing. Mm-hmm. And if I were to give you anybody in an administrative position advice, it would be build those relationships. One of the other things that I learned is that, you can't lead if you don't have any followers. And followers come as long as they trust you, mm-hmm. and they believe that you're being fair. And those were kind of my guideposts. I wanted, I respected, and having that mutual respect, I think, is really important. So that networking, that building of relationships, that genuine connectivity to the people who are joining you in this adventure of enlivening the concept of marine science and policy as we have it today, is, I think, really, really important. Yes, money makes the world go round to a point, but it's really the people. Yeah. And as I look back and my fondest memories of the College of Marine Studies and the time I was a dean was the opportunity to work with those people. We had this shared passion, this camaraderie. People didn't give us a snowball's chance to succeed in some instances. We were called boutique, we were upstarts, naive, a whole bunch of negative names early on, and by diddly, we showed them they were wrong. And it was that drive, that commitment, that enthusiasm that was exhibited by our faculty and our students, our staff. I mean, listen, the staff that I had, the budget office, the finance office that we set up to run the college because we were so complex, they were excellent. Every part of our administrative structure worked hard and work to support the faculty. And as I say, the faculty did their job. So that would be the advice that I would give you, Estella, is just to always attend to your people.
Thank you so much. It's been a lovely, lovely discussion, and it's really given me the opportunity to get to know you better. And over to Jim.
Very good. Well, this has been really exciting. For the folks that are in the attendees role, please notice there's a Q&A button on the bottom ribbon of your Zoom screen. And if you click on that, or if you look at it, you'll see that there is one question currently posted. And then there's also the Zoom webinar chat, and some people have been using that to make some comments that we'll bring back after the meeting. But if you have a question to share, please post it there. There's the question that's posted there now, Carolyn, has me thinking about two things. I'll ask the question, but in the last few years, in addition to serving in the marine policy faculty, you've taught quite a few undergraduates by number, and quite a few undergraduate courses by number, and undergraduate education's become a very important part of the college. I'd be interested for you to just talk a little bit about your passion for undergraduate teaching, and then put that in the context of the question about at what points in the tenure of the college, in the history of the college, did we consider undergraduate degrees, and how did that come around to where we're doing them now, but we stayed grad only for as long as we did?
Well, I'll address that last question first, Jim, because if you look at a lot of the oceanographic institutions, they were graduate only. There were only a few, in the 70s and 80s that had undergraduate programs. And that was because the sense was that there needed to be a strong foundation in the basic science principles that then could be applied to the ocean. And so the thought was not to dilute out that understanding too soon. And so there was a lot of reluctance. In fact, if you look at early graduate education in the ocean sciences, it was almost an apprenticeship. It was research being done at the elbow of the mentor with a few courses, but not really that much of a structured academic program. And you know, people of my era, but many of them were educated in fields other than oceanography or anything having to do with ocean science. They morphed, they adapted later. So it took a while to think that perhaps, you know, and computer science came along about the same time, and they did move down into the undergraduate education field, but it took us longer. And there were some marine biology programs, but not ocean science or marine science programs as such. And then over time, you know, it seemed like our knowledge base was growing, the interest in the ocean was growing, the preparation was more sophisticated perhaps. And so moving down into the undergraduate domain was thought to be the right thing to do. That being said, you just don't start an undergraduate program by saying, I think that this is what we need to do. It really takes some thought. Undergraduate students are very different from graduate students. And so you have to think about that. They're at a different place in their lives. They're at a different point in their maturity. And what you're doing is you're mentoring them a bit differently. And so it, you know, for faculty who had been involved in graduate education, all of a sudden to flick a switch and say, now we're going to do this, it was going to be a challenge, I think. I think we've overcome some of that challenge. But there's also this desire for experiential learning, and that's also something difficult to do with undergraduate students because they have so many other required courses that they have to take. So there are some challenges that are unique to, say, a marine science program at the undergraduate level, but they're not ones that can't be solved. As far as why, you know, I teach undergraduate students, well, when I first joined the university faculty, there weren't many like me at all, and I happened to be a beneficiary of some wisdom from a chair professor in chemical engineering, and he told me, he says, Carolyn, when you get a chance, always teach the freshmen because they'll renew you. He was a wonderful, wise man, and I never forgot what he told me. And so when I decided to go back to and teach full time, I thought, Carolyn, you're going to teach the freshmen, and you're going to teach the non-science majors because they need to understand that they live on an ocean planet, and they need to understand the ocean. And science is not a major; it's a way of thinking. And I keep stressing to these students, the undergraduate students, to think critically. Why do you think you're here? I remember one time President Roselle had all the deans in a room, and he looked at us and he says, what makes students different when they graduate from the University of Delaware? What are we doing to them that make them special? And one of the things that we're doing to those students, I think, is to have them have a body of knowledge and to be able to think about problems in a critical sort of way, and not to take that 30-second sound bite and accept it. I want them to use all of the knowledge that they've gained and say, I don't know if that sounds right, and test it. And that's, and truthfully, that's one of the reasons that I chose to stress undergraduate education.
Wow, good. There's another question that maybe bridge beyond the question itself, but of course, I mentioned at the very beginning that you and Rich Garvine and some others had a unique way of competing on your commute between the South. More importantly, Dr. Garvine was a really big name in physical oceanography, and you know, there were a number of particular people, but there's a question here about, you know, could you talk a little bit about Rich as a person and his role in the legacy of the college?
Oh my, Rich Garvine was special. There's, you know, I miss him today. You know, he was he was a Renaissance man, in my estimation. And he had this immense curiosity. You know, our politics always didn't line up. We would argue over things, you know. He was a certified race car driver. For those of you who know me rather well, I have a lead foot. And when I got my first Porsche, I went to Rich one afternoon and I said, so what are you doing this afternoon? And he looked at me and he says, what do you mean? I said, well, you're going to come drive my car. I want you to put it through its paces. And so, we had all kinds of interests outside of the classroom, you might say, or outside of the university. I mean, that sort of overlapped. But he had a way of doing research. He was one of these people who, he didn't get the recognition he deserved. I tried really hard to amass the support to get him recognized in a better light than he was. In the end, they recognized him after he passed away. But Rich was one of these people who demonstrated how interdisciplinary research works. I mean, he and Chuck Epifanio joined together and looking at physical oceanography and looking at the biological oceanography of crab larvae and how they moved. Physics informs biology when it comes to the world of the ocean, and they work together. And so he was just curious about a lot of different things, and he had this really gentle, low-key way of telling you, what he thought, and he would not compromise quality. There was nothing about him. He would very gently tell you and very nicely tell you he disagreed, and when he disagreed, you were not going to budge him unless you could give him evidence to the contrary. I mean, he held fast to, and that doesn't mean he was unyielding. What it meant was when he knew, what he felt he knew until he could see the evidence to the contrary. So there were several faculty. In fact, I could go through again a number of the faculty, and I would go many times, and if I had some wild idea, and I'd go try it out on some of the faculty to see what they think. And Rich would sometimes look at me and put his head down and shake his head and say, "What are you talking about?" And we'd turn the issue over and talk about it. And I would do that with a number of the faculty. And he was one of the people who really saw the opportunity in developing the Physical Ocean Science and Engineering program. Rich was an aerospace engineer. He was one of those retreads that I talked about. He started life out, not in the marine environment, but, when you're talking fluid dynamics, you're talking, we live in a liquid environment. He was very comfortable in working in the field of oceanography. His students have gone on to be successful in many, many different career roles. And that too is a testament to his ability. He was a wonderful advisor and a dedicated faculty member. And his research was excellent. There was no question. But he never was one of these who was grandstanding. He really wasn't looking for recognition. His reward was doing quality work.
That's really neat. One of the questions that came up is related to Vice President Biden. Apparently last year he was on the Tonight Show and he was talking about climate change, and he pointed out that his awareness of climate change started with the Marine Group here in the mid-'80s. And do you know anything about his how contacts here in our university and in our college helped inform his?
Yeah, well, yeah, we can go back. If we look at Debra housing, for instance, Senator Biden was very helpful in our getting Debra housing. It had ended up, it was Navy housing. It had ended up on a surplus list, essentially. We needed graduate student living quarters. We needed, we built Burden Center, and then it turned into something that, initially was to be dormitories, and I could give you another tale about that, but it turned out not to be dormitories. And so we needed places for students to live. And Senator Biden was very helpful in working with us on getting those, getting that housing. As I said, he helped us with the ship. And in the process, we educated him about what that work was going to be like, what we needed that ship for. And so there was a dialogue there. Actually, Senator Biden and I graduated from the University of Delaware the same year. So, we're of the same generation of sorts. And yet, we didn't have that much interaction because he was in the policy world and I was in the science world. But once he got into Congress, he did pay attention to the University of Delaware. And I remember he came to our 20th anniversary event on climate change. And he was a little dubious at first. And we had this event at the Hotel DuPont in Wilmington because we wanted to attract business and industry people to also interest them in our issues. And there was a very impressive group of people. And so when he walked in and he saw all these people in the hotel, he looked at me and I said, now, Joe, you've got this amount of time, because when he starts his oratory, you never know how long he's going to be. But I think he learned a lot at that conference. But when he got up to speak, I watched him, and, he kept elevating himself higher and higher. And I'm sitting there, and finally I'm looking at him. I say, enough is enough. I've got more speakers here. But he really paid attention to the substance of what we were doing. So we'll see what happens in the future.
Very, very good. You spent some time talking with Dean Atekwana about the entrepreneurial efforts, the all that entrepreneurial efforts, and one of the questions that came in is with the Horn Center for Entrepreneurship and other sorts of initiatives that have come up in other units related to innovation and entrepreneurship. And you spent time in the administration as well and saw what was going on there. Do you have anything about anything you can help us talk about how these connections are broadening and anyway?
Well, we've evolved in a lot of different ways. The Horn Center wasn't in, that, I don't even know that it had been established when I walked out as the dean. But again, you have to go back to substance, to what it is that your ideas, the worth of the novelty or the worth of your ideas, the significance of your ideas. Again, if you're going to be an entrepreneur and sell something, you've got to have something to sell. And then in a sense, that's what it is. It's selling an idea if you're going to be an entrepreneur. And trying to figure out how to capture the imagination of the potential is really critical. And that's the messaging part of it. And it takes cultivation, constant cultivation to be successful. I mean, when I talked about the Marine Associates, we had regular meetings, Marine Associate meetings where faculty gave presentations. I would meet with them offline regularly. So it's just something you can't just decide one day, well, I'm going to do it today, and 3 months later pick it up. It doesn't work that way.
Okay. Well, I have two more things I want to do, and then Dean, I'll hand it back to you for wrapping up. The first one is, and I saved this question, I want to, on behalf of Dave Einhoff, I just want to let you know that he thanks you for your leadership and your role in really forming his career and the career of other scholars as well.
How very kind of him. And thank you, David. I remember you well. And you know what? I saw him at a professional meeting, and I learned that his daughter was also going to give a paper. And I said, oh my goodness, I have academic grandchildren.
Very, very good. And then lastly, what I want to do is make sure that everybody knows, everybody who's here on Facebook or who's here on the Zoom call, that we really appreciated you attending. And we look forward to you joining us next Wednesday, September 23rd at 7 p.m. as we have the third in our series of conversations with the deans. And so please we want you to know how much we value you attending tonight, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Dean?
All right. So thank you very much. That brings us to the end of today's conversations. And I hope you've totally enjoyed this time, this 1 hour that we've had with former Dean Carolyn Thoroughgood. It's been a real eye-opener. I can say that I'm standing on the shoulders of great giants. And thank you so much for laying that foundation, that very, very strong foundation, that our college today continues to be known, for the great work that our faculty do, and all because you guys perceived a vision and you carried it through. So I hope to see you guys next week as I sit down with Dean Nancy Target, that I took over from Nancy Target. So next week, Nancy Target will be joining me for conversation. So thank you and have a wonderful and a great evening.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.